Okay, so here we are inside of 3ds Max, and to access Chaos Vantage we are going to be going up to this green icon over here. You're going to have to click probably twice on this icon because once is never enough. I'm not sure why it's like that, and that is going to create a live link between your 3ds Max scene and Chaos Vantage. So what that means is essentially anything that you do inside of your Max scene is going to update in real time inside of Chaos Vantage. Just in case you didn't know, Chaos Vantage is a real-time render engine. Okay, it's something similar to Unreal Engine, but not as advanced, but it's all that we need for the moment. Okay, so here we are inside of the Chaos Vantage window, and we are going to start on the right hand side over here because we notice that our scene is a little bit dark. So what can we do to remedy that? We can change our exposure by dragging this little dot to the right hand side or to the left hand side to make it darker. So obviously we want to make it a little bit brighter, so we're going to bring it up to about here. Next thing, you could also change the intensity of your sun or your HDRI that is outside over here. So you could scroll up over here and that will adjust the intensity of the HDRI that is illuminating this apartment from outside. Okay, then if you wanted to change your environment, whatever's lighting your scene, you can just click over here and go and look for a different HDRI on your computer. Okay, so that is that over there. Next thing we're going to do is we are going to come to the left hand side and we are going to just go through these tools on top here. So over here, this is just to pause the rendering. So if you're happy with the quality of the rendering, it will stop using your GPU and it will essentially freeze the frame, and at the bottom you'll see it will be pulsing down here, paused. Okay, and if you want to restart it, just click it one more time. Next we have our Canadian representation which is actually just an icon that allows you to render opacity maps inside of your scene. So I have prepared a lady over here that is a cutout, and she is essentially using an opacity map on a plane. So to enable that, you just need to click on that, and then that will allow you to render alpha maps or opacity maps. I think that that should be a standard and it should be on all the time, but I don't know why they decided to add that in. Should be default, but it is what it is. Okay, next what we can do is we can go to this little man. But before we go to that little man, I'm just going to show you how you can actually look around in this scene. So if you use your right mouse button and you click and you move around, you can look around your scene and that will give you a real-time update of what's going on. You can also use your middle mouse button to zoom in and zoom out, and you can middle mouse button, we jumped outside, just jump back inside, middle mouse button, and you can also pan. Okay, so we'll just leave that the way it is. Next we have this stair icon, and that is essentially just to enable collisions. So when we click on this icon, this will allow us to walk around our apartment in a first person kind of point of view. Okay, and you can also look around, and it's like almost like a computer game. So we're going to click escape, and this enables collisions. So essentially you won't be able to walk through walls or anything like that, but if you have stairs or something in your apartment, that will allow you to actually walk up those stairs and you won't go through the stairs. So it's pretty cool for exploring apartments or whatever building that you're working on. So for the moment we'll disable that. Next over here you'll notice that basically we have all of these icons, but if you click on them nothing happens, and that's because they are all disabled, because these are for selecting chairs and whatever you have in your scene and moving them, scaling them or rotating them. But we first have to export our scene to Chaos Vantage for these elements or these things to become active, because at the moment we are using a live link, so we are moving everything that we want to move inside of Max. And when we create a live link, which we'll do in a moment, I'll show you that these will become active. Okay, and you might be wondering why there's a giant hole in my sofa over there, and that is just because there is clipping enabled inside of my camera. So if you just have a look here, you'll see that that will disappear because the camera is actually placed outside of the window because there's limited space inside of this apartment. Okay, so now we are going to move to the camera section over here, and this move speed is connected to the free movement when you enable this little man over here. So if we enable him and we move forward with the, just in case you didn't know, it's the WASD keys that you need to use for that. So if we move forward, that's moving forward and back at a certain speed. And if we go back and we increase this speed, say to 6, and we come back to this, now it's going to be moving a lot quicker. Okay, so we'll click escape. Eye height, that's your standard kind of human eye height of 1.7 meters. And then you have your basic settings just for your resolution, your field of view and exposure, but your exposure is already set over there, so you don't need to adjust that. Next thing what we can have a look at is the depth of field. So I'm just going to change my camera and go to camera 2 that I have prepared over here. And if we enable depth of field over here, this is going to give us a kind of depth of field effect that we can also adjust. So if we just find our focal distance and find what we want to focus on, which is these leaves over here, that will bring this part into focus, and you can see that the back part is out of focus. Aperture size is what is going to control the amount of blur. So if we move that up, it's going to become more blurry, but you're going to have to adjust your focus distance once again. Okay, and these settings over here you can skip for the moment, they don't change much. Okay, so we're going to just close that, and we're going to go back to our camera 1. Okay, so here we have camera 1. We're going to click OK, and we are going to go to the bottom over here, and you have automatic vertical tilt correction. So what you can do, if you have your camera and you select the target and you move the target up, I think I already have it applied on here. If we select the camera one more time, if you notice, there's actually a Corona camera in there because this was a Corona scene at one point in time. At the moment, Chaos Vantage doesn't support Corona, but you can just change the render engine and convert it to a Vray scene. And there's a few materials that might be problematic, but it's not a big deal to swap between the two. So if you're a Corona user, don't worry, there's workarounds to get the result that you need. Okay, so I'm just going to check here. Yeah, this is ticked, so I'm going to untick this. So over here we have now the verticals are not straight, so you can just come into automatic vertical tilt correction and check that, and that will straighten out your lines, your verticals. Okay, and next what we can do is we can come down to post, and in post the first thing that we're going to see is this highlight burn, and that is, for example, if your environment is super bright and you have some burnt out splotches, you can drop the highlight burn and that will start to eliminate that, as you can see. Okay, but you need to be careful with that because that makes your scene have less contrast and it can become a bit flat. Okay, so I think we'll put that back to 1 and we'll just drop our intensity back to something a bit more reasonable. Okay, next we have LUTs. If you're not sure what LUTs are, they are lookup tables, and that is essentially like color profiles that you can put on top of your image. So if you enable that, you have a few ones prepared for you here. You can go through them and see what works for you. It's kind of like an Instagram one, and yeah, this cool one looks quite interesting, but you just need to adjust your exposure to match that. But for the moment we don't need to add one, so I'm just going to deselect that. And you can also load a LUT file if you have one on your computer. Just go into the color space, sRGB, which is standard, and then we move down to bloom. So this is almost like a diffuse controller. So if you look at this spotlight in the kitchen over here, if we increase this and the windows over here, this should increase the bloom of that stuff, so you get this kind of glow on things. Usually keeping this very subtle is best rather than going crazy. Okay, so that's the post-production settings. And then we're going to come down to render. Render, these are essentially your quality of your image, your GI solution. You can increase those if you're doing maybe something a bit high res, but in general these settings are pretty good, and I've used them on quite a few different projects, and I've left them exactly the way they are, and everything has worked out perfectly fine for me. Okay, next thing what we can do is we can come back to camera and we can just increase the size of this, and what we are going to do is we're actually going to create a little pan animation. So what you can do is you can just let's zoom in here. So we're going to create our little pan animation, and all we need to do is we can pan to the right hand side. Okay, and we are going to click on create new camera, and then we can pan, did I say to the right hand side? Now we can pan to the right hand side and we can create another camera. The next thing that we can do is we can open our movie editor over here, and all you need to do is drag your first frame over here and your second frame next to it. And now if we press play, you'll notice that we have created a super simple quick animation. So obviously this animation is too short, and what we can do to remedy that is right click and we can set the duration. So I think that around, say, 6.5 seconds is a good time, and I'm going to click OK, and we're going to try it again, and now it's something a little bit more cinematic. But there's a ramp on this, so it's kind of starting slow, then it goes quicker. So to change that, we can just set it to linear, and then our speed is going to be constant. So it starts at one speed and it ends at one speed, and then you can change to your next shot. Okay, and if you wanted just to render that out, you can just come to the teapot over here and check all of these settings. So it will be set at 30 frames per second for 195 frames, and this is your 4K settings, exposure, all of those things, and MP4. So everything's perfectly set up in here. All you need to do is hit start, and that will start rendering it. Just choose your location. Okay, so the next thing we're going to be looking at is actually exporting the scene to Chaos Vantage so that we can enable these settings over here, and we can import things from the Cosmos library. Okay, so here we go. We are going to click on this blue icon at the top, and we are going to just wait for that to update. I'm going to click yes. And now you'll see that all of these icons have become active. One thing you'll notice is that once again our scene has been reset to the default. This time what you can do is you can actually save your scene, and then all of these settings will stay the same. Okay, so if we just adjust our exposure back to where it was, something like that. And now you'll notice that when we go to our selection tool, we can actually select the sofa, or we can select the chair or the armchair, and we can actually move this, just move down a little bit, and we can actually move this to wherever we wanted inside of our scene. And then also, if you would like to rotate something, you can rotate it, and also scaling, for example, if you wanted to scale something, you can scale it that way. And Control Z also works, thank goodness. And yeah, so that's those settings over there. These are just your snaps, and you can change your pivot and then navigate around cursor right here. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is this one over here is if you want to actually play with that depth of field, you can pick your focus point. So we forgot to use that when we were working on this over here. But the next thing that we can do is actually we can open our Cosmos library, and we'll just wait for that to load. Okay, so now it is loaded. So if we wanted to, for example, add another person into this scene, we can just come to people, click on people, and that will load the library of people that we have. And for example, here are a few that I have already downloaded. If you want to download it, all you need to do is click on the blue icon over here and say, for instance, this guy, and it will start to download. It's already downloaded, that you can see at the bottom over here. And say, for instance, we'll take this red lady, and all you need to do is actually click and drag. So the cool thing about Chaos Vantage is when you click and drag a model in, it will automatically align it. So for people, for example, we want to align them to the floor because they're going to be standing on the floor. But if it was a painting, you could just bring it in and it will align it on the actual wall. So we know that we want to have her aligned to the floor, so we'll just click over here and we'll take this one and we will move her just behind the wall for the moment, and this one we'll move to there, and that's looking really, really good. And you can do the same thing with any scene, and you can also select something in your scene and apply a new material to it from the drop down menu over here. So just click on materials and say, for example, let's go for a concrete, and we'll just download this one, and you can just drag and drop it on top of that, and that will apply the concrete. Okay, so that's the Chaos Cosmos browser and the interactivity between the two. As you can see now that when we jumped in and we've actually merged the scene, when you select things, you actually have the option to edit the settings of lights and that kind of stuff inside of Chaos Vantage. So it's exactly the same as in Max, just that now you have all your settings inside of this this panel over here. So yeah, so that's the end of the first part, and now we're going to look at rendering out an animation from Max into Vantage. Okay, so here we are in the second scene. This is the Milwaukee Museum, designed by Santiago Calatrava, and this model was actually modeled by Alex Roman for the 3rd and the 7th, and you can actually buy it from CG Trader if you want to. Okay, so this model actually has animation already on it, so it opens up like that and it closes. So if we wanted to render this out in Chaos Vantage, all we need to do is we need to open Chaos Vantage by double clicking, because obviously one click doesn't work anymore. Get with the program, 2 clicks, and then we just need to adjust our exposure, bring it down a little bit. Okay, and benefits of doing it with GPU is that it's a lot faster. If we try to actually render this inside of Max, it would take a long time. So all we need to do is we need to come to this teapot over here, we'll click on that, and then we will choose a sequence. We can click 4K, that's the resolution that we'll be rendering at. And then one thing that you need to change over here is the frames per second, because we do not want 1 frame per second, because that will be extremely slow. So what we need is 25 frames per second. So that is automatically going to change that, but we know how long our animation is because at the timeline at the bottom over here we can see, so it's 250 frames. So that'll be 25 frames per second for 250 frames length. And we'll keep all of these settings the way they are, and we'll come down to output file type. So usually I just select MP4, but you can usually use MP4 because it's the most universal type, so most applications can open it. Whereas MKV, like for example Premiere, can't open that. Or you can choose image as well, so that will create a image sequence that you can import to most places, but I choose MP4, and you can just start the render by clicking yes. Output file already exists, overwrite no. So I'm just going to change that because I do not want to overwrite it, and we'll click start. And now that will start to go through all of the frames, and it will export an MP4 for you. Okay, so we'll just abort that. And that's how you export the animation to Vantage. You can also export the actual whole scene to Vantage and then render it from there. Then you'll have more control when you're editing stuff inside of Vantage. Alright guys, that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed the lesson. If you did enjoy it, please subscribe and drop me a like. Have a good evening. Ciao, bye.